Josh here with Northern Frogger. Today I want to talk about the basics of building a dart frog vivarium. In order to do that, we're going to actually be swapping out these two tanks. I'm going to basically take everything that's in here, put it into this tank. So first things first, I'm going to show you how I drain the excess water out of the drainage layer down here. Alright, so this is how I drain these tanks. I siphon stuff out of them. I have this little rig here, the primer bulb on here, so I don't actually have to suck on the end. But down in the corner of every one of my tanks, I've got another little piece of tubing basically that this fits inside of. The tubing goes down to the bottom of the tank. And basically all I do is stick this into that piece of tube, use the primer to get a siphon going, and then just kind of wait while it drains out. So I'm going to pull this top off, disconnect the mister thing, drain this thing out, and then pull it out of here, and then we can start building the new one. Alright, so disconnected the mister line, drain the excess water out, and pulled the tank out of there. Make it a little bit easier to work on. Next step is just to catch the frogs that are in here. Put them in a separate container temporarily so we don't have to worry about them. And then we can get to work on building the tanks. Alright, we got our two Xurius captured out of there. So I'm just going to put them up out of the way for now. And the next step is to put the drainage layer in the 20-gallon tank. Okay, first step is to add the drainage layer. Now we're using here something called LECA. Stands for Lightweight Expanded Clay Aggregate. If you can see that. Intended for hydroponics use. Or like aquaculture, this would be like a growing medium that you would use in a bed. I like it. You can use gravel. There's all kinds of stuff you can use for a drainage layer. You can just use like that milk crate stuff and have it propped up with an empty space. I like this stuff. I just really prefer to have an actual layer in there. Something with some surface area for some bacteria to grow on. This stuff is much lighter per volume than the equivalent of gravel would be. So I'm just going to use this thing now. I've got a bunch of pre-washed stuff here. The stuff in that tank I am going to reuse eventually. This stuff really, you buy it once and it lasts forever. Doesn't really go bad, doesn't really break down all that quickly. So this stuff is pre-washed stuff, but that stuff in that other tank, I am going to take that out and rinse it, and it will get used again eventually too. So I'm just going to fill this up. Give it about 2 inches. I like to go of this these clay balls in the bottom here. Pat it down, try and get it as flat as possible. That looks pretty good to me. So the next step is to install a new piece of tubing to drain it out later, and then to put the barrier in. Now for the barrier, I just use a standard fiberglass screen. And definitely don't skip on this barrier layer. I've seen terrariums where people have done that. They put in the drainage layer properly, they put the substrate on top, and then a couple months down the road they're wondering why everything's falling apart. The plants are dying, nothing looks good. You need this layer in here to keep your soil substrate separate from your drainage layer. You want that soil to be able to fully drain out. You never want it to be fully saturated. Barrier needs to be there to separate that out so the water can actually drain out of the soil. Okay, so we got this cut to size. Just gotta drop it in there. It is cut a little bit big. Make sure there's some overlap to kind of fold up along the edges. It's going to sit about that, and reuse the same piece of tubing from the other tank. just gonna sit in the corner. So that's basically done for that. I'm just gonna double check. Our drainage layer still looks pretty flat and even. And we can start filling it up with some substrate. Alright, so the next step is to add the substrate here. I've got some pre-mixed. This is kind of a mixture of like coconut fiber, coconut husk, some sphagnum moss. There's also some reptisoil in here. Might be a little bit of potting soil. This is like organic potting soil without any added fertilizers or anything like that. I've also gone through and taken out a few big handfuls from the old tank and mixed that in here as well. That's just going to give it a bit of a boost from the kind of established microfauna cultures that are in the other tank. There's probably going to be some springtails, some isopods hopefully I grabbed in there. And also all like your beneficial bacteria. There's going to be funguses and stuff in there. That's been a good healthy tank that's been established for years. So I do want to bring some of that bioactive soil over from that other one. Going to mix it in here. It's also going to give it a bit of a fertilizer boost from all the frog poop that's in there. So what I like to do, I'm going to give it one more check, kind of make sure that mesh is where I want it. And then what I'd like to do is take a couple handfuls, start putting it in the middle, and then just kind of working my way out to the edges. So I can push the mesh up against the glass and hopefully not get anything down in between. So as we get enough to kind of hold it in place, I like to just kind of slowly start sliding it out, kind of pinch that screen against the glass. Typically build it at a bit of an angle, and that'll create kind of the illusion of more depth within the tank if you have the back substrate a little higher than the front. Alright, so that's almost going to do it for the substrate here. I think my battery's about to die, so I'm going to swap that out, and then I'm going to come back in and start placing the cork bark from the other tank. Alright, so I think that's going to be good for that wood. Add some places for them to hide in there. Gives them a little more extra surface area to crawl around on. I think our soil is pretty much done. And I'm going to throw a little bit of extra moss on here. Just a very thin layer to kind of cap it off. So, there's those there. I'm going to add some leaf litter. I would like to add some more, but this is the last of what I got here. I'm pretty happy with how all of this is set up now. I'm just going to go prune some plants out of the other tank, start planting them in here, try and steal as much moss, or like live moss, this nice green stuff out of the other tank as I can. There's quite a bit growing in there, so I'm going to try and transfer that over. Plant some plants in here. I'll give it a good misting. Put the cover on and let the frogs go again. Alright guys, I forgot to hit record before I started planting here. Just wanted to give you a quick view of what I did. It's not that exciting to watch anyway. I don't think I'm going to hook the automatic mister nozzle up to this one yet for tonight. I'm just gonna saran wrap the top of it, mist it manually really well, and put the frogs back into it, get it on the shelf just for tonight. And then when I'm gonna order the glass for the top tomorrow, and then I will install the mister nozzle when I get the glass in there. So I wanted to give you an initial view. I know the glass is a little wet. I soaked it down pretty good. Some of that moss and soil and stuff I put in there was a little on the dry side, so wanted to make sure it was nice and damp before I put the frogs in. Just give you a quick view of that. I'm pretty happy with that. Pretty basic. Took a couple hours to do. Would have been even shorter if I wasn't trying to stop and film and everything. And this is basically set up, and this will go for years without really having to do much maintenance to it. There goes the male. There goes the female. Alright, so just gonna talk about the top here for a second. I did get the glass top installed and the mister nozzle installed here. To make this top here, first I cut out this plastic corner piece just from this stuff. This was, I think it came with a glass top kit for a 10-gallon aquarium. This is just like the plastic piece that's designed to sit along the back that you could go in and cut out your holes for your filter and heater cord and stuff like that. So I just had some of this laying around, so I cut out a triangle of it, measured up the hole, drilled a hole in here, and then I just kind of hot glued this in place. I'm going to use super glue or silicone or something if there weren't frogs in here already, but because I already had the frogs in here, I wanted to make sure I used something that wasn't going to have any fumes or anything like that. So once this plastic piece is in here, I just basically dropped the glass panels in. I just got these cut by a local glass shop. This is the 3mm. They do for I think $5.50 a square foot, and as long as you're just getting like plain squares or rectangles cut, you don't want anything fancy done, they don't charge you anything extra for the cutting. Let's call ahead with the dimensions, and yeah, I usually go pick it up later that day. They're pretty good about getting it done quickly. So I kind of just laid these in before I installed the actual mister nozzle, and then just kind of marked out a line where this was going to sit. I cut this corner off myself so you can see it's not quite straight, but still kind of practicing my glass cutting technique there. So this top should work perfect for everything it needs to do. It's definitely tight enough to keep the frogs in and the flies in and the humidity up, but it's definitely not like 100% airtight. It's not sealed in around the edges or anything like that. It's just kind of sitting in there, so you can get a little bit of air exchange. This male's sitting up there giving us a nice view today. And then I forgot to do something for a handle. I'm not quite sure exactly what I'm going to do for it yet. Right now I've just got a piece of electrical tape stuck underneath with a tab coming up so I can lift this up. But this makes it much easier to get into and work on, which is a big reason that other one was so overgrown, was that it was just too hard to deal with that top. So this should make that easier. It'll make feeding easier. I don't have to worry about replacing that saran wrap every so often as it gets old and cracks. So I'm pretty happy with how this turned out. I was also able to raise this shelf up a couple of notches, so it's a little bit higher, more visible now. So that pretty much does it. Those are kind of the basics of the dart frog vivarium. Just to recap, you want a drainage layer in the bottom so that the soil isn't going to be saturated all the time. A barrier layer to keep the soil out of the drainage layer. Then you're going to want a soil layer. Usually cap it off with something like moss or leaf litter. I would like to use more leaf litter, but I used up the last of my bag, so I'm going to have to get more of that. Then a couple of coconut huts with the dishes in them if you want to try to breed them. You can also kind of design it into the terrarium. Like some of them I don't use the huts, I just have the wood set up in a way that I can slide the cups underneath and they will use them just fine like that. And then I like to have some kind of wood in there, places for them to climb, places that create little nooks and crannies for them to hide in. You have to be careful what kind of wood you're using in an environment like this with the super high humidity all the time. But it's just got to be something that's going to hold up to that constant high humidity. So cork bark works pretty well for that. It will break down eventually, but I mean, these pieces have been in that other tank for years, and they're starting to get a little soft and squishy, but they're still in pretty good shape. Should last for quite a while longer. And then get your live plants in there. Most dart frog keepers, including myself, pretty much consider live plants to be a must-have for keeping dart frogs. And then you're going to want some microfauna seeded in the soil, like some springtails or isopods, preferably both. We might go over that in another video. They're just kind of considered the cleanup crew of the vivarium, and they're just going to kind of help keep that ecosystem running, keep everything healthy in there. And so I'm pretty happy with how that one turned out. The only change I think I'm going to make is have a sliding top instead of the hinge top. Going to make it even a little bit easier to work on, but even how it is way easier to get in there than the old one was. And it looks nicer too, without having that saran wrap hanging off the top. So that's pretty much good to go. And that's kind of how you build a basic dart frog vivarium. Okay, that's going to do it for this video. Thanks for watching. I hope you learned a thing or two about the basics of setting up one of these terrariums. I know some of the things I could go into more detail, like I kind of glossed over the substrate mix. I feel like some of that stuff could probably have its own video dedicated to it. This was kind of just supposed to be an overview, give you an idea of the basics. So again, thanks for watching, guys. Like and subscribe if you haven't already. Let me know in the comments any thoughts you had on the video, any questions or suggestions you have. Other than that, guys, I will talk to you next time. Happy frogging.